Ladies and gentlemen, there could be a massive amount of FOMO surrounding XRP in the next couple of weeks, and in this video, I'll be explaining exactly why. You have to understand that as we get closer and closer to the end of this lawsuit, that the amount of people that are going to try and basically increase their XRP bag just before it ends are going to exponentially increase. And obviously as well, the more hints that we get that it's about to be over, logically also the more people that would buy. For any of you that do not know, here's a little piece on Jeremy Hogan, who's a very well-known lawyer, not representing Ripple or anything, but he's very much involved in just giving the community updates from a lawyer perspective. And he just said this: there has been discussion about how/if secondary market sales of XRP will or won't be addressed in the Ripple case. Now, it's important because we are only confident XRP will be relisted on exchanges if the issue of whether XRP is inherently a security is addressed. Although the SEC's lawsuit contains language suggesting that XRP itself is the security like a share of stock, the SEC's request of the court in the lawsuit does not request anything that would confer this status on the asset, because it would ultimately also be ridiculous to do so. The problem is that it is likely the judge will not even address this specific issue then, since it's not explicitly raised by the plaintiff. And although you could argue that it's thereafter addressed by omission, would that be enough for the exchanges to now all of a sudden be on the right side of history again, to all of a sudden take on this risk to which they were averse just a little while ago? To continue on, we don't know. But there's hope. Hey, and by the way, this is not the only article that I've got surrounding all this. This is not the only lawyer that's speaking about the situation. As I said, there's a massive amount of FOMO that we're not covering here. This is just a tiny issue that I wanted to address to y'all, because at the end of the day, guys, I want you to be informed when you're making your decisions. And all I can say is if you appreciate that, make sure you press that like button. Really, in all seriousness, make sure you press that button. Doesn't cost you anything. But obviously, if you didn't like the videos, don't, whatever. First, Ripple could obtain agreement from the SEC to include, or the judge could approve language provided by Ripple in its proposed final judgment that the judgment does not cover secondary sales. Kick Interactive got the SEC to allow the language below about continuing their sales. Second, the judge could address the concerns raised by numerous amici in regard to secondary sales, including those championed by XRP holders led by attorney John Deaton. Apparently, the judge in the library case has agreed to address secondary sales at some level, so with that in mind, we'll see. And finally, the judge could be forced, if Ripple loses, to address secondary sales at the penalty stage when a disgorgement order would have to be drafted. Why? Because the judge must review the distribution of disgorged profits for fairness. And so the court must delineate who receives the funds taken from Ripple. It's at this point that Ripple can argue that only actual purchasers from its directly, from Ripple themselves, not just me and you transferring money around, and not secondary purchasers, should receive their investment back. This is required by the SEC versus Wang case. The court would likely agree because otherwise the disgorgement would be so diluted by the large amount of secondary sales because, well, if you think about it, every transfer of XRP is a secondary sale. That would be pretty awful to arrange. That any individual purchaser would receive pennies or less on the dollar. And this is, in effect, a ruling as to secondary sales. Voila. It's 3 a.m. and I'm suffering insomnia like always. Seems to happen to me on a sad holiday. So I apologize if this makes no sense. Going to try and go back to sleep. Good night. And in that same little wake of sorts, we've seen a couple of interesting things. First of all, one issue that was brought to light was what exactly would happen, and this is a very interesting point, what exactly would happen to all the funds that the SEC receives from winning the lawsuit, right? We were talking just now about disgorgement, and Crypto Airy brought up a very fair point. How exactly would we, the losers in all this, the stupid investors who lost money, decide where that money goes? Or does the SEC decide? Does the judge decide? It's a little bit of a further ongoing debate about where exactly the money would go. This is obviously only if they were to lose, but it's still an interesting point to bring up and an interesting thing to think about, but that's just besides the point. Two things. So digital asset investor shared a post, dimes to donuts, this thing is over. And that's because Metaco, which Ripple bought a little bit earlier, they basically said weekend vibes. You can see on the NASDAQ advert. NASDAQ congratulates Ripple on their acquisition of Metaco, which is peculiar. I mean, if you think about it, why exactly would NASDAQ congratulate Ripple if they were such a scam company? And it was also quite interesting that Brad Garlinghouse actually liked the AI's tweet about this, where he said, dimes to donuts, this thing is over. Are you guys understanding that? So a YouTuber posts that the case is over with the idea here that NASDAQ is tweeting and congratulating Ripple, or at least putting it up on their tower, which is interesting already. And then the CEO, who just stated that he thinks the lawsuit will be over in a couple of weeks, is liking that. Maybe I'm seeing this all way too deep. It's obviously possible, which is why I'm saying, hey, take a look at it for yourself and please realize everything for yourself, do your own due diligence and think about it for yourself. But the way I see this is one of the most telltale signs that it's over. Well, anyway, there's actually one interesting thing. There's a lot of people coming out now to say that it might actually be fake. Wait a minute. So a lot of people are pointing to previous ones where it was also akin to this. Even CoinMarketCap has actually applauded them. So, you know what? Since it got 1 million views, it's basically the same thing. Since the CEO liked it, right? It's all fine. It doesn't really matter if NASDAQ themselves did this. At the end of the day here, it's about the insinuation by the CEO, which I think is most interesting out of all. But any of you sleuths, go find out if it's fake or not. Go let me know down below in the comment section. What I also sometimes think about is, wouldn't the SEC try to stop Ripple from taking over these companies and merging whatever if they were such a scam yet again, right? Think about that. Wouldn't they stop the CEO from functioning to this extent if they were such a scam? I'm just thinking out loud here, but the other interesting point was how Brad Garlinghouse is still so excited about the US and so willing to stay in the United States because remember, Ripple could just leave the United States any day, but they decided not to. Anyway, that's what this little article here was all about. The more interesting one was this article right here. XRP to the moon, pro-Ripple lawyer expects Fomo to kick in at this price. John Deaton elaborated on his sentiment, emphasizing the potential ramifications of failing to recognize XRP's current undervaluation. Quote, XRP sits at $0.48, right? $0.48. And it's crazy to think about how many people who refuse to buy it now are going to buy it once it's over $1. What's even more crazy is that FOMO won't likely kick in until we're at $2 or somewhere along that ballpark. But yeah, from almost every perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And I think it kind of proves itself with all the whales that I've recently been buying. I'm not sure if you guys have been up to date with all that, but recently I've been having to make more videos about massive whales putting money into XRP. And the crazy thing is, you'd expect the price to go up from things like that, right? But in reality, guys, you have to understand this really carefully. A whale buying a coin doesn't necessarily have to increase the price. And you might ask yourself why or how? Well, if you do an OTC transfer, which is an over-the-counter trade, I could theoretically speaking sell you something at a current price or whatever price that we decide upon. Let's say, for example, I want to buy $1 million worth of XRP and I have $1 million in cash right here. I could actually now buy it off of him, you, whatever. And the same thing can actually be done for 20, 40, 60, $400 million, whatever. And the reason they do this on the side is to not move the markets back too much. Do you guys remember whenever Ripple makes all these announcements of, hey, we have partnered up with this or that company, very often they do actually sell or provide them some XRP at, again, a rate that is not affecting the markets. So again, they decide upon a rate. Potentially they actually give a discount because you have to understand very often what these wealthy companies, I should call it, these big companies do is they want to be involved in a project. They want to help out. They want to this, that, but they don't want to buy it at the full price. They just want to be an earlier investor, but you can't, go back in time basically. So what they do is since they buy a bulk, they buy a ton of these coins, and they're actually going to provide and hopefully in that sense, again, this is my own thoughts, also by this little investment of sorts, also increase the price over longer term. It's fine to give these guys a discount with the agreement that they don't sell for a specified amount of time. So that could also be something that's happening in the background because you got to understand the FOMO is probably significantly large here. As you get, not sure what happened there. As we get closer and closer to this end, and a lot of these lawyers are starting to really put some final ends on it, because you just can't extend this for too much longer. All that can happen is for the judge to get some sort of decision out there, and the question is, oh, exactly how long will that take? But there's really not that much more room for further negotiation from the judge's side. So we're just waiting for this result, which can take a week, a month. The Ripple CEO said it'll take a couple more weeks, so that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. But yeah, honestly, guys, it's so crazy just to think that this all could be over so soon. And I know you've probably heard me say this so many times that you're sick of it. You're thinking, Dusty, again with these dates. You have to understand, though, even a faulty watch is right sometimes. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be, but it could be. A broken watch is right sometimes. Right now on the sidelines, the most important deal, or I guess advancement, has to do with the debt ceiling, and we're covering that every single day. I'm looking at it every single day, everything that's happening in that field. But Bitcoin has not been moving for a ridiculously long amount of time, and so I've got a lot of time to look at XRP, theorize, and think about it. And yeah, it just makes sense for a lot of people to buy XRP because, as I said before, it's about triple, I think, of the lowest price that it got to after the lawsuit started, which still is pretty low if you compare it to where it probably would go if they were to end up in a victory. And so the risk to reward from every single perspective is just really, really good. And as I said before as well, if a lot of these people could have skipped these 2.5 years of waiting to buy XRP right now at 3 times the price that it was back then, I think a lot of people would have actually taken them, or I guess us, or taken it up on that offer. Point being, right now, probably a lot of people are buying because they know what's coming, and be prepared for a massive amount of FOMO to kick in once they actually win and the price starts going up. It's probably going to get crazy, and right now, we're all very freaking early. That's it.